28-year-old lady, with a career I have dedicated my heart and soul into. I have my own style, a comfortable flat that seems like an extension of me, and a small circle of friends that get me. I'm not one to overshare. I'm autonomous, glad of the life I have created. Until lately, when things started to go off course, life was good, at least. My younger sister Clara kicked things off. She is 23. We have always been close, perhaps somewhat too near. She would borrow my clothes and copy my gestures when she was growing up. Normal younger sibling stuff. But it has become something quite compulsive in the past year. She seems to be attempting to be me, not only copying me. Her abrupt change in direction for her career raised first questions. I work in a specific area, something I studied for years. Clara changed her major out of the blue to mine. I attempted to dismiss it, but then she applied to work for my company on an internship. The same one I am employed with. She seemed cool when I asked her about it, as if it were a coincidence. "I just think it's great what you do," she remarked. Still, it was only one stop. I have been with my boyfriend Alex for some time now. He has a really effortlessly stylish look, casual but sharp. Not long after the incident involving the internship, Clara comes up for a family dinner with her new boyfriend, almost Alex's clone. Same haircut, same eyeglasses, same wardrobe style. Everyone observed, and the air thickened with embarrassment. Alex started firing me these, "Are you seeing this?" stares. It felt disturbing. Then we have to deal with the apartment. At last, I had saved enough to move into the lovely apartment I had been looking at for months. Less than 1 week after I moved in, Clara says casually she signed a lease in the same building. When I questioned her, she gave me some vague response about the vibe. It felt like she'd found out where I lived and just chose to join the party. No heads up, no asking for advice. The mirror reflecting social media came next. A few days later, there's Clara, same place, same caption, like it was her own discovery. I had posted a picture from my favorite coffee shop. She would post something shockingly similar if I uploaded a picture of my apartment's furnishings. Starting to notice and message me about it, my pals among them. "Is your sister copying your life?" one inquired. I tried to dismiss it, but it was getting more difficult. Benevolent as they were, my parents were blind. "Oh, you know how she is," they would say. Still, this was hardly usual sibling rivalry. I felt as though someone was gently wiping off my identity and substituting their own for bits of mine. I began to get apprehensive, as though she was always hiding, just ready to grab the next item I did. Alex was fortunately in agreement. At first he attempted to laugh about it, but I sensed worry in his eyes. "If she starts wearing my cologne, I'm out," he would say, but his voice carried an edge. The whole arrangement was a mindfuck. I thought I was losing authority. At last, I chose to approach Clara to establish some limits without being strict. I assured her she didn't have to be exactly like me, and that it was normal for her to have her own interests. She simply stared at me blankly, as though she didn't know what I meant. "I'm just being me," she remarked. I nearly believed her as well, almost here. The facts, however, were piling up, and I couldn't get rid of the impression that she was acting. I began getting strange, paranoid ideas, and wondered what she could mimic next. My identity seemed to be sliding bit by bit. I made the decision to see a therapist, someone outside the circumstances who might assist in organizing all of this. Though I felt strange talking about it, I left determined I could not just watch Clara run my life. Time came to stand for something. She had no idea, though, that I had finished this warped game. My therapist worked with me to create a strategy. Feed Clara a consistent diet of fictitious lifestyle updates and watch if she would bite. It was like laying a trap to reveal the depth of this fixation. I first cleaned my online profile. On social media, I said I was adopting minimalism, organizing my closet, and starting a path to inner happiness by owning less. I put pictures of empty shelves, a solitary pair of shoes on an otherwise bare doorway, and clothes racks with just a few barely hanging limp. Clara began sharing similar pictures within days, repeating what I had said about downsizing and discovering inner calm. Her fans praised her transformation and ate it up, almost too easy. I then aimed for a sharp visual transition. I shared a selfie with a comment about changing things and wore a temporary wig in an astonishingly dark electric blue. My buddies participated, energizing me in the comments. A few days later, Clara arrived at a family dinner sporting exactly the same blue hue for her hair. I found it hard to believe. She had, in fact, done it. Alex looked at me across the table with a screaming, "I told you so!" I kept the charade running and raised the intensity. Suddenly, I started to enjoy pottery, sharing images of my creations, store-bought mugs and bowls elegantly piled with clay dust and flowers, and writing about discovering calm in this new pastime. Predictably, Clara soon revealed her own pottery path, complete with pictures of a beginner's kit and well-placed clay smudges on her cheeks. On my laughing, I nearly choked. Then I indicated casually on social media that I could be thinking about relocating to a made-up isolated town. I wrote on the appeal of a tranquil life with straightforward days free from distractions. Of course, pure fantasy. But Clara soon began making hints about wanting a change of scenery, sharing pictures of rural homes, and waxing lyrically about the appeal of a slower pace. Still, I was just starting to become warm. Knowing Clara was into fitness, I created an outrageous exercise program. I railed about finding serenity in the endurance, and talked about doing endless stair lunges in my apartment building. A few days later, Clara was showing pictures of herself on the stairway, discussing her commitment to her new exercise. That degree of dedication was astounding. The best component is that friends of mine were in on it. Clara, of course, swallowed it up, totally blind to the fact that she was the only one not in on the joke. They would remark on my crazy posts with stuff like, "So inspiring," and "You're a true minimalist icon." By now, Clara's social media reflected my own odd lifestyle updates exactly. I even shared a recipe for this terrible green mush I dubbed a immune-boosting superfood mix, which was just spinach, seaweed, and wheatgrass blitzed together, and really nasty. I choked my way through a video of me acting to enjoy it, and in hours Clara was sharing her own amazing green mush recipes, with a smile that seemed just as false as mine. Starting to notice was my family. They noticed Clara with her blue hair, understated dress, and postings about a small place none of us had ever heard of. At last, my mother gave me a call, seeming really perplexed. "Is everything okay with Clara? She seems different." She had no mistake. Though not in the way she believed, Clara was changing. As a last touch, I told Clara I was considering leaving my work to become an online plant therapist, a totally invented position in which I would offer guidance on how to speak with your plants to help them flourish. As I told her, I laughed. However, she nodded, curious. She told our family a few days later that she was thinking about a different line of work, perhaps something incorporating nature and therapy. I almost spit out my coffee. It all came together when our mother, perplexed and concerned, sat down both of us. "What's going on with you, honey?" she queried Clara. "I don't even recognize you anymore." Uncertain of what to say, Clara turned to face me while I sat there silently savoring the show. By the conclusion of it all, I had this strange mix of gratification and relief. Clara had tasted her own medicine, a full dosage of what it's like to live someone else's life. Only this time was all of it ridiculous. It was a dramatization of my life, not me anymore. She would have followed along without missing a beat. The strategy was working, maybe even better than I had anticipated. For Clara, though, I had not expected how swiftly things would fall apart. She first matched me with almost terrifying determination, following every crazy lifestyle modification I offered. But the fissures started to show then. I noted a change in her social media posts one morning. A dark, dreary picture accompanied by a message on wanting to find herself and feeling lost. While some of her friends gave broad words of encouragement, Others began showing concern in the comments. She obviously was under pressure to keep up this inflated portrayal of my life, and even her supporters were beginning to notice. Clara's postings started to drop throughout the next week. She was still moving through the motions, the stair lunges, the pottery, the simple statements, but her eyes revealed a tired, hollow look. It all seemed forced. Her pals began to distance themselves, once her main supporters. One of them told another at a coffee shop that Clara's demeanor had totally flipped. "I don't even know who she is anymore," she remarked, fidgety, looking at her phone. Alex began to feel sympathy, even though at first he thought the whole thing was funny. One night, following Clara's forced smile across another pottery update, he said, "I almost feel bad for her." It was like seeing her gradually fall apart, unable to match the outrageous criteria she had set for herself. Things started to go bad when Clara applied to intern at my company. Though I hadn't even brought up the post to her, she apparently found out and applied. Though I stayed out of the way, I knew she lacked qualifications. She lacked the experience I'd spent years accumulating. She was angry when she turned down the offer. Her letters to me became tight and nearly accusing. She began suggesting that I had somehow undermined her prospects, believing I had made it impossible for her to flourish. Not long after, at a family dinner, she faced me at last. She was looking for someone to blame, after obviously having enough of trying to match my influencer lifestyle. She produced a scene discussing how difficult she had been trying to meet my expectations and how I had created an image she would never be able to replicate. The entire table went quiet. I just sat there listening as she portrayed me as the villain of her story, the unreachable model she felt compelled to pursue. I gently reminded her I was just enjoying my life when she was done. Neither had I forced her to follow my decisions, nor had I set any expectations for her to meet. She had been the one copying me, occasionally down to the least detail, and maybe she needed to discover her own route. At last our mother, who had been silently watching the entire exchange, stepped in. Turning to Clara, she softly but firmly advised her that it was time to quit attempting to live my life and begin paying attention to her own. Clara's face flushed red, and for a second I considered she may go. She merely stared at me instead, furious but mute. I gently suggested that she might find out why she felt compelled to copy everything I did by talking to someone. She answered nothing, but before she turned away, there was a flutter of something. Shock, maybe, or awareness. Clara then went very quiet on social media following that supper. There are no more minimalist postings, no pottery pictures, no stair lunges, or plant therapy rants. At first, the quiet felt unusual, but I could almost feel the strain releasing, as though I could at last breathe once more. I could return to sharing about my life, free from concern for what she could duplicate next. I experienced tranquility, slinking back in for the first time in months. Alex noted the variations as well. He smiled at me one evening while we were lounging on the couch, surfing through our phones. With his phone showing me Clara's now empty profile, he said, "Looks like you finally got your life back." His comments carried weight that caused me to stop and know he was correct. After everything, I at last felt free to simply be myself, not continuously watched, mirroring my every movement. In the next weeks, I concentrated on my job, friends, and connection with Alex. I started spending more time on my hobbies, getting coffee with friends, and generally savoring my routines. I nearly forgot what it was like to live without copy reaction when I looked back at how far I had come and how much standing up for my own identity meant. Though I loved my sister always, I realized I couldn't keep giving bits of myself up to make her happy. I felt as if I had taken back my life for the first time, and perhaps, just maybe, she would have at last absorbed the lesson I had been attempting to teach her all along. A few quiet weeks went by, and I was beginning to wonder whether perhaps, just maybe, things had calmed down. Then suddenly, Clara surfaced on social media, this time stressing self-discovery, welcoming her uniqueness and making a big declaration about beginning over. She seemed to be arranging a theatrical rebirth. I wasn't sure whether to find myself intrigued or dubious. She was, on one hand, at last discovering her own road. But the language seemed strangely familiar, as though she were repeating earlier comments I had made to her. Her social media started to swirl over the next several days with updates. She shared about her new tribe, folks I knew from my own broad social circle. She was now uploading selfies, talking about discovering her people, somehow linked with them. The interests followed next. Suddenly, Clara became enthusiastic about tarot reading, crystal collecting, and handmade jewelry making. Funny thing was, although I had quickly thought about all of these, I never truly investigated. She seemed to have grabbed my brief ideas and braided them into her self-discovery story. Ever perceptive, Alex joked that her new independent road was only a reinterpretation of my former plans. Clara began making passive-aggressive remarks about how she was at last free to be herself and how she had felt imprisoned for years at our next family event. She was not staring straight at me, but it was obvious who those remarks meant. I attempted to ignore it, but by dinner's end I couldn't remain quiet. Though I wanted her to really explore her own interests without bringing me into it, I gently but firmly told her that I was happy she was discovering her own path. The room became silent. Clara claimed I'd never let her investigate her own interests, that the only reason she'd ever copied me was that I'd made her feel judged. She stared me dead in the eye. When my mother tried to switch the topic, the tension stayed. Later on, when I told them, my friends advised me to keep establishing limits and avoid allowing her provocations to control me. They were accurate. Not too long afterward, Clara's social media changed yet more. She began sharing these evasive, mysterious status posts on being the misunderstood sibling and on how others love to keep you in their shadows. She was portraying the victim, herself the sibling who had always been eclipsed. It was quite taxing. Concerned, my mother phoned, suggesting I should get in touch and bring peace. Though I could not bring myself to back down, I knew she only wanted the suspense to stop. I couldn't just sweep my life under the rug since I had spent so long allowing Clara to define it. It was unpleasant. My therapist advised me to keep grounded and not let Clara's problems fall under my purview. I started questioning whether ignoring her completely was the wisest course of action. Whatever she tweeted or hinted at, maybe I should simply keep doing my own thing and let her wear herself out. That choice let me concentrate once more on my own work. I convinced myself that whatever she did was her business, not mine. I stopped monitoring her social media and muted alerts. I had a life of mine to live. Things began to change after a time. Clara's new friends, those she had snatched from my social circle, started to pull away. Messages from others who had hung out with her asking whether she was okay came in. They noted how her attitude kept shifting and how she would address being misinterpreted in this evasive, theatrical manner. A few claimed they struggled to approach her as she seemed erratic and as though she were performing a show. Then Clara's career began to run across obstacles. She applied for numerous internships, including one in my field, and I learned via the grapevine that her interviews went poorly. The comments were that she seemed disorganized, and as if she didn't know who she was or what she desired. Not unexpected. After all, striving to match every shift she'd observed from me must have made it difficult for her to create her own goals. One rejection after another, her annoyance mounted. After a few weeks of quiet, Clara finally broke down on social media with a long, emotional post on feeling lost, overwhelmed, and never good enough. She spoke nothing of my name, but it was clear who she meant. Seeing the post, my parents got worried. Inquiring whether I would talk to her and try to sort things out, they phoned. I consented after some backtracking. I was ready to try if there was any way I might assist her in finding her own path. I did not want to keep fighting with her. We convened in a little coffee shop. Though the mood was tight, I entered calmly, prepared to pay attention. Clara, though, did not restrain herself. She grumbled about how the example I had set destroyed her, and how her choices had always been subordinated to mine. It was practically dreamlike. When she was done, I explained that I had never meant to be any kind of benchmark for her, and answered kindly as best I could. She had spent years pursuing an ideal of my life that was never meant to be hers. She snapped at this, charging me with being judgmental and self-centered. Her resentment changed to tears, and we sat in quiet for some time. At last I told her I loved her and wanted to see her happy, but I couldn't keep giving up my own serenity to please her. I told her that each of us needs room to flourish personally. She said, almost grudgingly, during a tight silence, that she had no idea where to start. She had not known what her own looked like, since she had been so committed to honoring my decisions. I volunteered to assist her in exploring her interests and providing support, but I made it clear she had to choose a road really hers. Clara stopped posting on social media in the next weeks as well. Dramatic posts and mysterious remarks are gone. She seemed to have stepped back at last to consider. I felt not that continuous anxiety in the background for the first time in a very long time. I gave my own work, friendships, and relationship with Alex top priority. Then, slowly, Clara resurfaced on social media. Her entries this time seemed different. Actual, even. She was interacting with other members, discussing the books she was reading, and showing pictures from a book club she had joined. Images of mountainside views and pals she had made accompanied a post about a local hiking organization she had joined. She began even helping at an animal shelter. Seeing these improvements makes family get-togethers seem lighter as well. The underlying conflict was no more present. I felt comfortable, as well as Clara seemed to be. Clara gently approached me one afternoon, when our mother was occupied in the kitchen. She seemed a little anxious, but resolved. She said without drama that she'd often felt inadequate and insecure, and that she'd look to me for instruction to try to close those gaps. She talked about how she had imitated me, not out of hate, but rather because she really thought that was the only way she would feel valuable. Her candor sent off a flood of compassion and comfort. I told her I forgave her when she finished. For a few quiet minutes we stood there, and it seemed like a weight had been taken off. Between us, there was a level of understanding not before present. From then on, it felt normal whenever we spent time together. We even went on some treks together, and she began asking me about my interests, genuinely curious about what I was doing without copying it. It felt as though we had struck a compromise, a means of maintaining proximity while honoring our individual boundaries. Then some fantastic news arrived. Clara received an internship in a field entirely unrelated to mine, something considerably more suited to her abilities. She seemed truly thrilled when she recounted her success. Her voice clearly exuded pride, and for the first time, I felt really delighted for her without any trace of concern about her darkening my life. Over supper, our family marked her new employment. My parents were delighted, and I could see in their eyes how appreciative they were to see us at last getting along, each traveling on in our own unique path. It felt as though all the conflict, all the awkward situations and misinterpretations had at last found equilibrium. Clara was on her own road. I could keep on mine. When I thought back on everything, I saw our own development. Although it had been challenging to set limits with Clara, and standing up for myself had not come naturally, I was glad of the way I had handled things. Alex drove me out to celebrate, and over dinner he raised his glass to toast. "Here's to getting your life back." I grinned, experiencing closure I hadn't anticipated. The story was at last ending. Now, Clara's social media posts focused on things that were obviously personal and distinctive to her. Mirroring and striving to live my life as hers vanished from view. When she was at last living a life really hers, I felt pride in her growth. I offered a commentary on the experience in one of my own entries. I thanked her for the teachings I had acquired, the limits I had at last set, and the fresh intimacy with my sister. It was a straightforward comment on the need of speaking up for yourself and letting the people you love pursue their own path, not a dramatic post. Having Clara on her own road, my sense of self seemed more robust than it has ever been. Although the road had not been simple, looking back, I would not change it. We both discovered what it meant to really find ourselves, and for the first time, I was at last at peace. Story 2. The news struck me as a bodily blow. Currently 18, I have to pack and head off before the end of the week. It is dreamlike, like though I were caught in a fantasy. My life was permanently disrupted when I was 7 years old. My biological family crumbled, and I was placed in foster care. I was finally assigned a couple I will call the Harrisons. Though I know I shouldn't, I really want to shout their genuine names into the emptiness. They were nice from the start, and over time, that friendliness developed into something I really thought was love. I grew up next to their biological son, Ethan, whom I thought of as my brother. I called them Mom and Dad. The Harrisons had another foster child, a sweet 9-year-old lad who had spent slightly more than a year with them. They were not only helping me. Although I never underwent official adoption, it never bothered me. They always reminded me that our family was not defined by the legalities. I thought so. But today, the hard truth came down on me. I saw they were getting paid a sizable monthly salary for helping me. That money has stopped now that I am 18. They had sought for a staying put agreement, which would have given me less help until I was 21 or so. At least that was what I believed. They sat down today to deliver the terrible news. They clarified that fostering was a business and that their limited budget just let them not afford to maintain me. They said I had to go before the end of the week. They wanted my room for a different placement. It's not personal, they remarked, as though those terms could somehow lessen the damage. They wanted to keep in touch and told me they still saw me as their son. It reminds one of a terrible joke. At 18 years old, I have no job, no income, and soon will be starting college. Still, their 25-year-old biological son gets to visit. Now it's very evident. I was never really part of their family. Second, looking for assistance and a brief respite, I got right on calling Mr. Davies, my social worker. He set up an emergency meeting for that afternoon to go over my choices and maybe arrange for me temporary lodging. Many have pointed out that the Harrisons cannot lawfully give me just 4 days' notice. I will most surely bring this up with Mr. Davies. I want to leave until I have somewhere safe to go. I will not end up homeless. I have also thought about getting in touch with my institution, but my entrance is contingent on my A-level marks, and I'm not sure whether they will assist till I am formally registered. Finally, should I be not living with them, I will make sure the staying put allowance is withdrawn. Thank goodness I have some savings. Once I attend university, several individuals advised I would be qualified for a bursary. I will have my student loan to cover everything. I have also started looking for part-time work. I met Mr. Davies for a long and challenging session. He clearly felt upset by the way the Harrisons were treating me, and was quite sympathetic. He chatted with them straight after our conversation, and I went out to get some food. He filled me in on what had transpired when I got back. The Harrisons have decided to let me stay until the end of August, apparently after Mr. Davies spoke with them. I so have somewhat more time to work things out. Should I feel uneasy, I can relocate to a youth hostel while awaiting more permanent accommodation. For now, despite the unpleasantness, I have decided to remain with the Harrisons. Their staying put allowance will keep coming until my formal move-out date. Third part, heartbreak and confrontation. I never bothered about the Harrisons getting paid for looking after me. I understood I was a foster child, and that their financial assistance meant I had a lovely home for 11 years. I knew everyday rate they got for my treatment. Until lately, I never felt different or unloved. What altered their views is beyond me. They avoid eye contact, and I cannot leave my room without experiencing the loss of the affection that previously permeated it. Mrs. Harrison used to make sure I joined family dinners. Today she brings food to my house and knocks to let me know it's here. Replaying this gesture in my head, I try to persuade myself they still care. Instead of Mom yesterday, I spoke with her using her first name, Sarah. She seemed to be hurt in her eyes. Though another part of me feels guilty, another of me is glad. She should be experiencing the suffering she is bringing forth for me. I keep reminding myself that over me, they are selecting a quite tiny sum of money. Right now, I am worth to them just that. Ethan came upon my first post online. He came to my room, held it up, and inquired as to if I had written it. I tried first to deny it, but he saw right away. I stated I felt he knew when he questioned why I hadn't said this. What he read really startled and disgusted him. He knew nothing, and would have backed me had he known. He assumed I had decided to move out, not that I was being driven out. Ethan shared the post on the family group chat against my objections. Though I wish he hadn't, he did it out of a need to defend me. Though I worry it may have done more harm than good, his goal was to help them see the effects of their behavior. Though neither of them has answered, they have read the message. I left my room last night. The worry is unbearable. I realized I needed treatment right away after they told me. I gave Mr. Davies, my social worker, a call. He has been there for me consistently through thick and thin. I went over all, including the shock, the short notice, everything. Said this wasn't right. He was very worried. He scheduled an emergency meeting for that afternoon, said we would decide what to do, locate me somewhere to stay should I so require it. He assured me not to panic. He would make sure I was not abandoned on the street. At least that was a minor comfort. Many people online noted that the Harrisons cannot merely dismiss me with 4 days' notice. They said, that is not legally allowed. I noted to Mr. Davies to mention that. That's for sure. I won't be leaving till I have somewhere safe to go. I considered phoning the university as well. Though it all hinges on my exam results, I should start there in the fall. Since I am not yet formally registered, I am not sure if they could assist me now. It's simply another item aggravating the tension. I also want to make sure the staying put allowance ends, should I be living apart from them. Given that they are the ones wanting me gone, it seems unfair that they would continue receiving paid for me. Fortunately, over the years from birthdays and odd employment, I have been able to preserve some. Though not much, it is something. People online also stated I might be able to acquire a bursary from the institution, and there's always the student loan, though if I could help it, I didn't want to depend on that. I began searching online for part-time employment as well. Though I have to do something, it's a lot to balance all at once. The conference with Mr. Davies was somewhat heated. Still, he was rather exceptional. He listened to all I had to say, and you could tell he was furious with the way the Harrisons handled me. He stated he had to talk to them personally after we spoke. He advised me to head get some food, clear my brain, and he will phone me once he was done. I so walked to a small cafe down the street and picked a sandwich. My stomach was knotted, and I cannot really eat much. Mr. Davies briefed me on what had transpired when I returned. After he spoke with the Harrisons, they indeed altered their minds, at least somewhat. They decided to let me remain right until the end of August. Though not ideal, it is better than nothing. It allows a few months to sort things out. Mr. Davies also stated he can arrange for me to stay in a youth hostel while the Harrisons find me something more permanent, should things grow too unpleasant with the Harrisons. Though for now, I have decided to stay with the Harrisons till I have to relocate. It is not what I wanted. Up until then, they will keep getting the staying put subsidy. Knowing they are paying money for me even if they do not want me there feels odd, but right now, it is the best choice available. The Harrisons earning money for looking after me never bothered me. I knew I was a foster child from always. That was simply the way things were. And really, for 11 years I had a lovely household. Though I knew they received a certain monthly allowance, it never felt like it related to money. Not until just recently. What changed is not clear to me. It like a switch turned off. They glance at me hardly at all. I seem to be a ghost in my own house. Even walking down the hall makes me feel this great emptiness where the love used to be. Mrs. Harrison, Sarah, used to make sure I attended every family dinner. She simply takes a plate to my room now, knocks on the door, and walks off. I keep going back over it in my thoughts in search of some indication they still care, but it just feels far. Something just broke yesterday. I called her Sarah, not Mom. She looked to me with hurt, like she at last sensed a fragment of the suffering I am experiencing. Part of me felt good, but another side of me felt awful, like though I had done something quite nasty. Still, her name was only that. Right now, she is just Sarah, what she is. I find myself wondering why they would choose a little additional money above me. That sums up it rather precisely. Right now, I am worth to them just that. Then Ethan came upon my page. He arrived in my room clutching my words in his palm. He straight out asked whether I had written it. I tried to deny it at first, but I lied terribly. He sensed straight ahead of me. Why had I not told him, he questioned. I merely stated I assumed he knew. At what he read, he was indeed startled, furious even. He knew not at all. He assumed I wanted to live out here. He would have defended me, he claimed. He was unaware I was being let go. Ethan posted on the family group chat without even thinking. He intended correctly. He wanted them to know how seriously they had offended me. Still, I wish he had not. Simply said, it made everything worse. Though nobody of them has said anything, they have seen it. The quiet is overwhelming. Not even left my room since. I am being crushed under anxiety. I feel as though I am about to have a panic attack. This weight in my chest makes breathing difficult. Describing how this feels is difficult. It feels like being turned aside once more. Like I am not deserving of a family. For my family were these people. My anchor, my constancy was them. And today, they are the ones deserting me. It's like lost in the woods without a compass, a map, or someone to call for aid.